Hello, and welcome to the Beyond the Pivot podcast, where we talk with founders, investors, and overall movers and shakers of the African startup ecosystem. If you do not want to miss a beat, follow Beyond the Pivot on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever you get your next episode. We also know that 90% of you who listen to our episodes do not subscribe and follow our channels. So please go to YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok and change it right now. Now, if you follow us, rate episodes, and comment on them, you will make sure that more people will learn the stories of our incredible guests and their work. Today, our guest on Beyond the Pivot is Biola Alabi. Biola Alabi is a global leader, founder, and angel investor whose work spans media, technology, and business strategy across Africa. From producing award winning films and television shows to founding mentorship programs and advising major corporations, she has become a driving force in shaping Africa's creative and entrepreneurial landscape. We are very lucky to have Biola with us today. So, welcome to Beyond the Pivot, Biola.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So, Biola, my opening question will be probably one that you did not get before. I found out that we, even though we are coming from two different environments, have two things in common. First one is that we always have to explain where we are from and where is our accent from. And second one is that we both lived in Chicago. So just let's start with something that's very important for everyone who is from the state of Illinois. What is your take on a deep dish pizza?
Geno's all the way. Geno's, and every once in a while I'll do some Unos. No, so actually, besides just living in Chicago, I was actually born in Chicago. So
Oh,
yes, I was born in Chicago and lived the first few years of my life in Chicago, and then we moved to Nigeria, and then I moved back to the U.S. and I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. So yeah, so very familiar, very Midwest background.
I've been to Cincinnati only for one day on a day trip, but I studied in Chicago for university. I know it was completely different experience that my peers got at the university in Czech Republic. So I'm wondering,
Ah.
like, what was your take out of the University of Cincinnati? What did you like learn there? What was the one thing you think you grasped and took away from that experience?
Probably community. And I think that's really sort of been the story of my life, is really around building communities. I think as someone that lived between multiple cultures, building communities has always been very important to me. So one of the things that I was able to do at University of Cincinnati is build lifelong friendships. Still friends with most of the people I met freshmen, like the first day of school, besides just being on WhatsApp groups, taking vacations together, getting them to fly to Nigeria for my wedding. I mean, it's been building lifelong friendships, and also using that also as a springboard to become much more interested in the global world. So because of the experience at University of Cincinnati, I was able to go to one of my first international conferences, which was in New Zealand, at the age of 19, and really fell in love with Asia. And then went for a traineeship in Seoul. So that if I wasn't at the University of Cincinnati, I don't know if I would have gone to Seoul. Probably wouldn't have gone to Seoul if I hadn't gone to New Zealand, and just sort of fell in love with Korean culture, but actually was originally interested in Japan. So lots of things came out of being in Cincinnati and in that community.
Based on what you're saying, I think I picked the wrong university because the farthest I went was Kentucky. So next time in my next life, I have to do better.
yes. So I was just about to mention Biola. I think you've had quite a fantastic career. Super amazing reading through your revenue. And we were inspired. Actually, Mulemwa, who's been organizing from our side, actually asked me to even say she's a fan. She's a huge fan and has been following your work. But really, from producing stories, right, on screen to investing in entrepreneurs and businesses, looking back to your childhood, be it growing up in the USA or your childhood experience in Nigeria, what do you think has been a key influence or defining experience that has kind of like planted the seed to where you are today?
Sure. And when I sort of was thinking about that, it really reminded me of a very specific story. So when we first moved to Nigeria, one of the things, and I mean, Nigeria's changed a lot since then. Christmas was big, but it wasn't big in the same way that it was big in the US. And so like in the US, from November, like the lights go up, there are Christmas carol, there are Christmas plays. You're constantly going to Christmas plays. And so one of the first things I did in my neighborhood was organize a Christmas play. And I was totally just organizing kids, like, let's put on a Christmas play. And we started like sort of saying, what would you do? And of course, I later on realized that I was producing, but that's not what I just thought I was putting together this little thing that I saw happen in the US. And so I put this together. And so as we were sort of like practicing and playing, adults would stop by and be like, oh, this is really nice. And then I was like, oh, would you like to buy a ticket? And so we put this whole play on. We sold tickets. Everyone made money. We divvied up the money. So I sort of like had this little production. And so the next year, so then actually halfway through the year, I was like, let's do a summer play. So I like started wanting to like turn this whole thing into a business. And so I did like a summer play, and the kids were still all into it. And so by the time it was like the next year for Christmas, I was like, okay, we're gonna do our Christmas play. And I think by then, people had basically, I think I had become a dictator. So I think I had moved from producing to being a director. But once again, no one tells you this when you're 12, when you're 10 years old, you don't really know what's happening. And so I had a mutiny, and half the team went to go set up their own play. And so this lucrative thing that I'd been doing, like literally like fell apart, and my play, like, so none of us were successful because now we were competing. And it was a very early lesson in capitalism, and also a very early lesson in when creativity meets finance and how do you manage and build the right team. Once again, all those things are much clearer today, but just then it was just almost sort of like, they just don't like me. I'm too popular. But no, it was a really, and I think that even as my parents were pushing me towards the sciences, because once again, when we moved, as African parents, and also when we moved back to the US, it was very clear, like, these are clear pathways to success. And so I was also very interested in science. I did very well in science until organic chemistry, and that was very quickly. It was very quickly that this was not going to be. Being a doctor was not going to be the way for me. And then I switched to pharmacy, and so I had my like one of these first internships at a pharmacy. And I remember sort of every day, kind of like being excited and getting there, and like following the pharmacist around and asking, "So what do we do next?" And they were like, "This is it." And I was like, I'm not sure I can. I mean, I'm not going to name the store because everyone knows the store in America. I'm like, I'm not sure this is going to be the right thing for me. And so I was really at a crossroads of what to do and what to do next. And so I pivoted into public health because I thought, okay, if I do public health, I could figure out a way to like maybe find my way back to medicine. And so from public health, I then had to take marketing. So marketing was a requirement as part of public health. And that's really when I started to really figure out that there was a way to harness a lot of my creativity and at the same time still be adjacent to some sort of health and medicine. But then my marketing career took off, and that's really what was the path that it's led me. So I think, and then when I did finally get to produce getting into my first TVC, because as a marketing executive, you eventually commission a TVC. Then all the memories from the play as a kid came rushing back, and I realized that I was home. And that was it, sort of like the beginning of my career in marketing and media, and even in investing today, which I'll love to, we'll have some of those conversations of how I see those as parallels.
And I would like to double click on something there, Biola.
Yeah.
It takes someone who's quite self-aware to assess the environment and space they're in and realize that's not their space. Like, many people are in spaces where they don't belong, right? And yet they're still not aware that there's a space I'm not supposed to be in. Are there influences or anything that made you become so self-aware, even as you were experiencing all of those things? Is it that you've always been like this? Is it mom, dad? Like, how did you become so self-aware?
So self-awareness, I think for me, one of the things that made me start to realize that this might not be for me was just getting lost in the crowd. So there was just, getting lost in these huge 200 people classes like organic chemistry. It just did not feel that I was going to get any closer to what I wanted to do. That was number one. Number two was just not like, there was an element of failure to it too. Like when you're not used to failing, you really have to sort of analyze, like, why am I failing at this? Like I know this, what's happening here? And then just also just engaging with, I had an advisor at university. And so talking to my advisor, and there was sort of this new world that was open to me of like, well, what things do you like to do? I love my parents, but it wasn't just part of the conversation as Africans. It was just like, no, this is what you will do, and this is how you will do it. And so, and I think that people have changed. And of course, like by the time they had the third, fourth kid, my parents were kind of like, whatever you guys want to do. I think I was also a learning. I think we sort of learned from each other, and we have that relationship today where we're both student and teachers of each other. And I think those were the things that just made me more and more self-aware. But what I do have to say that when I did tell them I was switching my major, there was an openness from their side. It was sort of like, okay, we get it. Like, this is what we would like you to do because it is like the least path of resistance. And we know you will at least make a living doing this. But if you decide that that's not what you want to do, sure, how can we support you? And I think once I had that support, I was able to then go to my advisor. And I think that conversation really evolved into really getting to know myself more and really find out more about myself and really take some time to look at different professions and specialties. And I think that's where marketing and public health became a real opportunity for me. So one of my first jobs, which was also a requirement as the major, you had to do a 3-month, you had to do 3-month internships. And so I got this opportunity at a very new agey hospital in which they wanted to pilot a different way of women having children. And so they had basically built like these hotels. It was like basically trying to build like a 5-star hotel as a maternity experience. And so they wanted someone that had public health and marketing background. I'd like fit right in. And then I literally changed and ended up taking like 2 more summers of school to be able to minor in marketing. So it was sort of a little bit about like opportunity sort of directing me, and also the way people were thinking was just changing because no one was doing like these 5-star hotel. There was like a 4 seasons for maternity. That's what they wanted people to think about. And it just happened to be like really fit into public health and marketing. And it was a very quick validation that I will find a place in the world. And that made it a viable major for me before even graduating.
And do you have kids, Biola?
Yes, I have a daughter now. Yes.
Okay, you have a daughter. So this is my question, right? You spoke about something where you were changing your major, and you got some support from your parents. I remember my own journey when I was in uni, and before graduating, I told my parents, I'm not going to get a job. I am going to start a window cleaning company. You can imagine the shock that they had, right? So has that been your approach as well with your daughter as well, where you have been supportive, or is there a path of least resistance where you think, or you've been encouraging her to take?
No, my daughter's quite young, but what I am finding is that it's a very different conversation with my friends and myself. And so, as an example, a friend was just saying that his son wants to study medicine, and which is like for an African parent, that's like, yay, thank you. And what he does is he sent me what he sent his son, and it was like jobs that would no longer exist because of AI, and medicine is on there. So he's like, please don't do this. And so it was like so weird for a parent to be telling their child, don't study medicine, please. And I actually have more than one friend that is telling their child not to study medicine. How quickly the world has changed. So, and I definitely think like in my conversations with her, there's also a lot of like, what things move you, what interest you. She wanted to take fencing, and as like when she said fencing, I was like, Nigeria, what type of thing is this? Like fencing. Oh, what was fencing? So I was just like, oh, sure, fencing. Let's register for fencing. I definitely think that we get to be different parents in today's world, which is fun. Yeah.
So in your professional career, you went from let's say becoming doctor to marketing which is a big shift. That I'm wondering, what was the step after building Four Seasons hotels for maternity hospitals to do Sesame Street? How did you get way to production of well-known worldwide phenomenon as Sesame Street in address?
Yes, yes. So after doing the five-star maternity hotel, I actually went to Korea. So that was when I wanted to sort of travel and do something internationally. So I went to Korea, and while I was in Korea, I got the opportunity to work for Daewoo, actually in their sort of relocation department, where they were putting these programs together for executives that were relocating. And one of the executives that we were working with said, "Look, I'm going back to the US to go launch Daewoo's new product line." Daewoo were going to be launching their cars in the US. And so they were looking for people that sort of had a sense of like understanding Korean culture. At that time, I still understood a little bit of Korean, and also that had marketing experience in the US. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'd been sort of like bumming around Asia for about 2.5 years at that point, and was ready to sort of like go back to the States. But it was like, hey, there's a job. Sure, I'll come work for you. And we really got along. So I came and I was on their launch team for Daewoo vehicles. And so we had three vehicles that we were launching in the US. There was the Lanos, there was Laganza, and there was another one. And so I was on that team, and really it was exciting. And part of our strategy for that was to go to first time car buyers, because in America, your first car is huge. And we were coming in at a price point where we can sort of like compete with, instead of secondhand, you could have a new car. So that was sort of like our strategy. And so we targeted like, once you turned 16 and you had your driver's license and your parents wanted to buy you your first car. So I really was in that youth marketing segment. And so youth marketing segment, I was there for a few years, and then I got recruited by a .com company, an online e-commerce site that wanted to be a destination site for 18 to 24-year-olds. And college textbooks were the entry point. And so we were building this online college textbook because I had already been doing youth marketing. I'd already had a lot of university contacts. And so I was marketing to universities. And when the .com bust, bubble bust, we were one of the people that were casualties in that. But I always sneak in an opportunity to say that we did get an offer from Amazon, which we turned down. Obviously, it was not the same Amazon that it is today. But it was really fun. I mean, it was a really fun experience. And so I'd had that youth marketing experience. There was a really tough economy. And so I was really trying to figure out what to do next. I was putting out sending tons of emails and sending a lot of resumes out. And just around that time, there was sort of there was the 9/11 catastrophe. And so Sesame Street was putting together a project to target young parents and children on how you can have a conversation around what happened. So it was a project that was going to be in Mandarin, Spanish, and English because of the area in Lower Manhattan that was affected. And so I applied to this gig, and it was going to be a short-term contract. I got the project, and it was like the way it was originally conceptualized was that it was going to be the production of a number of TVCs, and that's television commercials. And so I had planned, because I had done quite a number of television commercials in my .com role, and in Daewoo, I had been part of those teams. They were like, okay, well, we want to really do like micro. We want these to be micro content. We usually do long form content, but these TVCs will be sort of like communicating this message. You already have marketing experience. You have public health. This is sort of They actually were getting the funding from the Department of Health, so having someone that with a public health background was really helpful. And so that's how I got my foot in the door at Sesame Street, and really worked my way up from just a lonely project manager to a senior executive that was launching Sesame Street in different markets, which was what brought me back to the continent.
I also noticed that when I was doing research, that you were a force in putting a lot of shows in local languages in African in Nigeria, like to put those languages in the forefront and make them be alive again on TV and other places. So where
Yes.
did this passion for the local languages came from? Because I, from Czech Republic, only 10 million people in the world speak my language, so I understand how it is kind of hard to find something in your language that's not just from the local region. So I'm wondering, where did your passion come from?
So actually, my love for local language productions and indigenous language productions actually came from Sesame Street. So one of the things that Sesame Street does when it takes the format to other markets is that it really tries to localize it and put it in local languages. And so, for example, the South African format that we did is in 13 languages. And one of those, so all the official languages, I believe it's 11 official languages, and sign language is also one of those. And so we were really, it was always like, so that has always been the ethos of Sesame Street. And so any market we go into, you have to do the market analysis of the languages. And so I knew based on the adoption of those programs in different markets, how popular they were, the local language versions were, even over the English language. And so I felt very strong. And also too, like just all the research. I mean, Sesame Street is such a research based organization. And so the research on how children learn with language and how parents and children interact more when they're when they're watching or listening to their language. And so there was just mounting research that if you did programming in local languages and indigenous languages, you will always find an audience for it. And the biggest hurdle was really proving at multi-choice that we can get people to pay for it. That was really the biggest hurdle. Once I was able to convince people that we can launch full 24-hour channels in these languages, it was now like, how will people pay for this? And so that was, yeah, so that's really where that's where my belief came from. And then as also as someone that is of two cultures. My parents were they were very deliberate about us speaking our language in the house. And so a lot of times when people hear me speaking, they're always very surprised if they hear me speaking Yoruba, because we're Yoruba speakers. They're like, you speak Yoruba? I thought you grew up in America. And I'm like, yeah, but you still have to speak Yoruba. And also like my younger brother, who by the time he was growing up, there weren't that, most of us had left the home. He learned a lot of it from watching Nigerian programming. And so I knew that there was also a market for it in the diaspora. And I knew there had to be, if there was a market for it in Chicago where we were living, there had to be a market for it at home. So.
And Biola, I see something common here. So from setting up that first Christmas concert, right? So you're starting and launching something almost like from scratch, right? We have launching a new car brand in the United States, right? You have the .com company that you were working for launching an online textbook. So to some extent, I'm like, there is an entrepreneur here that I'm seeing, right? And to even Africa Magic, you're known for launching Africa Magic across the African continent. And like you said, there is quite a lot of research that goes through all of this work. Yeah, so I just wanted you to take us through the process of launching something, especially the research, because we have some founders that listen to our podcast. We also have investors. What's your process for understanding all of these different markets that you try to launch different products in?
So yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, one of the things that really that I love doing, and I think I've been able to do that internal, like as an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, is I really love when we're able to bring new things. I mean, like just amazing products and finding the right market. I love that. I love that design process of like, who's the right audience for this product? Is this the right product? Do we sort of need to like change and like, what do we need to do when it comes back to developing these products and bringing them back to market, and sort of like that product market fit that feels, that people say over and over now, but really that process of saying, let's go back and test this. Let's test this. Let's take this to market. Let's see also how we can fail. And that was another thing that at MultiChoice that was the ethos. And I mean, that really comes from Course Becker, the founder, was that fail fast and fail quickly, but like learn something from it. And so there was an opportunity to bring different things to the market. And test different things and see what works and what doesn't work. And so for me, when I've been a founder or when I've been an entrepreneur, has always been that let's continue to reiterate, but let's always take something to the market. I know some people really, I mean, and I think that's probably like a blessing and a curse sometimes, because I also have worked with people with PhDs, and nothing against people with PhDs, but they're definitely much more, there's a different research process that you go through when you're developing something in a lab than you do when you're developing something sort of in real time. And so I felt like there's always sort of an opportunity to bring those two worlds together. And that's also what I think Sesame Street did very well. And so a lot of our researchers were very market savvy. And so they also taught me a lot about really how you like product development, product safety, because safety is a big thing because we're developing products for children. So product safety, getting parental buy-in. So lots of focus groups with parents, lots of creating co-viewing and co-watching opportunities with parents. And so I was really able to take a lot of the lessons I learned at Sesame Street and bring them into multi-choice. And it was very different from the automobile industry, which is what Daewoo was. But there was always learnings and there are always threads that come through this. And I think that even as an investor, sometimes I think back to the team at Daewoo and I think about like that team. What was the most important thing about that team was execution and how we executed. And then I think about can this team execute? Like as I look at as I talk to a team of entrepreneurs, I'm like, can this team execute? If I'm talking to researchers, I'm like, how quickly can this person research a product and bring it to market? So right now we've been we're planning to invest in a company that's been founded by a PhD, very hardcore science-based PhD. And one of the things I admire is just his ability to take this idea, constantly innovate, but then go to market and test it with customers. And I think sometimes, we can't all be Steve Jobs, which is that, the customer doesn't know what they want until you give it to them. I think sometimes there could be a co-creation that you can do with your customers. And in today's world, people want to see, and I think customers are also different today. They're also used to things not working the way you might want it to work. If you look at version 1 of ChatGPT and today's version, all of us are training it. We're co-building ChatGPT, and everyone keeps on saying every day, "This is just getting better and better." It's getting better and better because you're training it. And I think that's the difference in the audience. And I think part of like your research and bringing things to market always has to be about who is my customer, will this work for them? And I think even when you're talking to corporate customers, keep testing things with them, keep sending things back to them. That's been my learning anyway.
And what are some of the challenges that you've seen? Because if I think about launching a product in the US, it would probably look different with launching a product on the continent, right? What are some of the key differences that you've noticed when it comes to launching different products? Yeah, and how have you navigated some of those challenges?
I think you also have to have a thick skin and be ready to fail. When you're testing things and you're trying things out, there's going to be a high level of failure, but I think there's also going to be a high level of success. And so one of the things that at MultiChoice that we started to do was really do a lot of local productions, and we would take some bets that didn't work and some bets that did work, and then some bets that didn't work, and we would reiterate as we were in season. And so we would look at the data. I mean, that's where data is your friend. We will look at the data and look at when people drop off from watching and when we had data. But it took a long time for us to get that data. So sometimes we were working in the dark. But when we could tell when people stopped watching something or when people stopped tuning in, you can reiterate, you can change things on the fly. And then if you can't, then you have to be willing to let go. And I think some of the biggest mistakes I've made is being married to an idea for too long and not letting go. And sometimes that's because it's an amazing team. You don't want to disappoint an amazing team that's put this together. You've seen the hard work that went into it. And so I think that the biggest thing as product managers, which I think all of us are product managers, is really to be willing to admit when you failed or when you didn't get it right. And, and also to be in an organization or in an environment where that is welcomed, and that is not penalized. I remember I was in a meeting once very early on in one of my roles, and the CEO said, "Who gets fired if this doesn't work?" And literally everyone was like, "Well, I don't want to get fired." And I was like, I'm okay. I'll get fired if this doesn't work. But I really believe in this. And I mean, at the end of the day, they weren't going to fire me. They might not have given me my raise, but I kind of was hoping they weren't going to fire me, but we then got really successful. We had a lot of success with it. And so no one got fired. But I think you have to be willing to fail, even if it means being fired, and really take those convictions to the next level. So, but really my biggest mistakes is being married to something for too long. And even in investment, probably not right enough an investment sooner rather than later. That's been a hard lesson to learn.
So how did you move from being employed to actually having your own company, then investing? What was the transition there? Because one thing is to be backed by a company and be entrepreneur. The second thing is then going solo or with your team and be entrepreneur afterwards.
So, look, I mean, I think that being in companies really served me well. I was able to build a lot of confidence. I really loved working with big teams. I always say, the one thing I miss the most is free cash flow. I love free cash flow. It just makes you're able to just do so much. You can go buy things. You can have this different conversations, and so I miss that. And that's the beauty of working in big organizations and big companies with multiple revenue lines. So how that happened, I was at Sesame, and my role Sesame sort of led me to multi-choice. I actually was pitching multi-choice for a partnership. I really wanted us to have a Pan-African partnership in which we can localize Sesame Street across multiple markets, but we needed a strong partner. And so that led to them just recruiting me to say, actually, we want to be bigger in Africa. And my boss at the time secretly, timidly asking, so would you move to the continent to do this work you want to do for Sesame? And I was like, oh, yes, in a heartbeat. And then she was like, oh, maybe we could talk. And so that sort of began my conversation with MultiChoice. And then I was recruited to come to the continent. And so we really had a lot of conversations about where should I be based. And I really felt like I wanted to be, if I was going to be on the continent, I wanted to be in Nigeria. I was going to be traveling anyway, 75% of the time. So it didn't matter. And I love the work we were doing at MultiChoice. We were able to do quite a number of things and launch big projects, big names, big platforms. And from there, I got headhunted to come and look at digital platforms for a telco. And one of the things at that time was that telecommunication companies were in this process of transitioning and transforming to be media companies. So they really believed that they were going to have to become digital platforms, not necessarily just pure media plays, but digital platforms. And so because I had had the e-commerce experience in the US and also had the media, I was headhunted to come and sort of look at how to do digital platforms for a telco. And so we were working on that, and we launched a couple of products. Unfortunately, I had to step back just for personal reasons at the time. And so when I stepped back, I was like, they were like, oh, we still want you to be consulting. So I was like, okay, I'll launch a consulting sort of business so that I can consult, and you would basically be my only client. And I'll probably come back after sort of taking care of this personal stuff. And as soon as we started, we then got a couple of contracts. We got some people wanted us to, they commissioned us to do some studies on the media space on the continent. We got commissioned to do the digital transition that was happening on the continent. So what would be DTT look like from DTH? And so literally we were busier than we ever thought we would be our first year of business. And so alongside that, I knew that I wanted to also look at, because I was looking at digital platforms, and so that sort of was like, we were looking at CVCs, which is basically corporate VCs. So we were looking at a lot of different models at the telco that really started to get me thinking about the digital future of the continent. And so I knew I wanted to start to invest in digital platforms, and I wanted to, because we had started having those conversations at the telco. So that was where the seed was planted. And so when I launched BAM, I started having those conversations. I was like, okay, BAM will also do investments, but we have to do a couple of investments to be able to show people, because track record is key in investing. That we can pick winners. And so we did a couple of investments. One of my first investments was, it's called Big Cabal Media. They're producers of Tech Cabal on the continent, and I joined their board because that was another thing. I was like, okay, I mean, I've been an operator, I'm now an investor. I need to join the board to even know what that looks like. And so that's a company that I'm immensely proud of, the progress, the contribution. And I also felt like, as an ecosystem on the continent, we needed a business like that. So it was really a proud investment. And then a producer pitched me that they wanted to produce something around food and African food. And so that was actually then incubated that within BAM, and that became Bukas and Joints. And we found an amazing team, and they went around to just showcase local restaurants. And then we went to London. So this was starting to become, I was starting to see a thread in either investing, co-producing. I was starting to see that, but a lot of it was still coming back to financing. Like, how do you finance these things? How do you find the right partners to the co-investors? And so we would get co-investors on certain projects, and investors were like, well, I want my money. Can you guys like give me my money? And so it was like, there then needed to be an education around patient capital, like the lockup period. And that sort of got me into like trying to produce the type of films and projects that will give us a return. And then COVID happened. And that sort of like made me shift totally like, okay, you've learned enough about this ecosystem of financing. Let's figure out a way how you can actually be an investor. And at that point, I probably had done about 20 early stage investments using personal capital. BAM had some, maybe BAM had about 3 or 5 portfolio companies. I had about 15. And so during COVID, I spent a lot of time on the phone with founders, supporting them, thinking about ways to pivot, ways to rework, finding capital for them. So talking to other investors. And so people were like, oh, let's do something together. And so that really got me thinking, and also seeing how difficult it was for people to raise capital. And just what sent me down this rabbit hole of how do you get to say you're an investor. And so so I started angel investing like officially, and really learning more, and teaching more people to do that. And then I joined Acasia Ventures as a GP, and we raised a small fund, and we deployed to 25 companies. So that was a lot of learning. And now being at Delta40, I feel like it's blending venture studio where you're co-building and providing support to founders, but also investing. So it's been sort of like a real 360 of how do you build companies, how do you fund companies, how do you return capital to investors.
I love that you started. I just want to do a consultancy that so I can deal with my personal stuff, and then you just keep going. Like opportunities, show up, and before you know it, you have a venture capital firm.
The reward for work is more work. And so in the sense of like, let's take a sabbatical, I ended up creating a whole lot of work for myself. Yes.
But that's the beauty of it. You never know. You just have to do the first step, right, to open the door to that.
Or the reward for good work is more work. So once you start doing good work, people find you and say, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? So it's always more work.
Yeah, so I was wondering because I noticed that you are part of NGO networks across all parts of Africa. You know, like you are in Lagos, you are part of your venture capital firm in Egypt, you are funding founders from all parts of Africa. So my question is more like, do you see differences how coachable they are based on what part of Africa they are from, whether they are from Arabic Africa or West Africa or Kenya or Zambia, maybe something to do with the educational system there, or how prone they are to take a risk, or something that like little nuanced differences that you have noticed in your lifetime.
So funny enough, like African entrepreneurs are very, so like, once again, it's like a life cycle, right? So in the beginning of our entrepreneurship of creating digital businesses, we were doing copycat models. And also too, like, even if you look at the early stage of the .com, it was also sort of like just taking brick and mortars and digitizing them. Like, that was sort of the business model, which we can talk about another day, and what happened then and what that means. And so I think that the early stages of digital platforms was just taking what was happening in other parts of the world and bringing them to the continent. And then I think that transitioned very quickly, that we needed to develop local solutions. And so I think that the environment of where people are really has it dictates a lot of the type of companies people are building. But one of the things that I find across the continent is the tenacity, the excitement, and the optimism for what can happen in the future. And then you have these other things that I find just to always blow me away. Like when I land in a place, I have a friend and we sort of like, I text her and I say like, what is the billboard? I have this billboard index, and sort of like, what are the first 10 billboards I see in a country? And I have to say, they're very similar across the continent. There's always going to be religion. There's always going to be some sort of betting or finance billboard, some sort of money transfer, and there's always going to be a telco billboard. So that's sort of like billboard index that you're going to find. I do think that the cities are very similar. Like when I'm in Cairo and when I'm in Lagos, to me, there's like literally no difference. I mean, it's like just as chaotic and organized. The founders are just as passionate. The founders really believe in their markets. They just believe these markets are the biggest. And then when I go into smaller markets, like sort of like sub 100 million population, or maybe sub 70 million population, people are really like very much more like looking at how they can like the first thing they say is like these are the other markets we're going to go to. So like the big markets are like this is so huge, we don't need to go anywhere. And then the smaller markets are like, yeah, we really want to break into this market, we want to go here, we see this opportunity here. And they're sort of much more on like how do you aggregate the markets around you to create a bigger market. And so the founders there, the hubris is different because they're much more collaborative and much more like, and this, the founders are from different parts of these markets that they want to bring together. And then you have really like sort of much I mean, for Africa, mature markets, and those are very different types of customer base. And so you have to really look at the type of businesses they're building in those markets, what the customers are like, what the revenue models are like. So for example, if someone brings an advertising revenue model to you from Kenya, it's very different from a South African advertising revenue model, just because there's just much more advertising dollars in South Africa in comparison to Kenya or even Nigeria, even with our population. So I think those are some of the nuances, but I think in general, like African founders are exciting to work with. They're building for not only their country but for global markets, and there's a lot of optimism on the continent.
Hmm. And with your experience, Biola, which is, by the way, professional experience, which is exceptional and amazing, it makes you kind of like a great mentor, especially with the programs that I have seen. The Mentor Pitch program, which we talk about a lot with TVC Labs in Nigeria. Actually, I
Yes.
currently work at Bongo Hive, which is a technology and
Ah,
innovation
yes.
hub in Zambia.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we also launched a similar program, which is Mentor Pitch Zambia. And for those that don't know, at least if you don't know about Mentor Pitch, it's kind of like investment with the aspect of providing mentorship to the founders that are on the program. And that has been quite similar with Delta40. I can see it's co-creating, right? Co-building with the founders. With the tech about investment that you made, you had a board seat, right? Why do you think that is important as you make your investment decision to work with the founders and co-create the business together?
I mean, I think that there is a lot of times where, first of all, I love to learn. I love to learn new things. So I feel like I'm more of a student than a mentor a lot of times, and I feel like a mentorship relationship is two way, it's both ways, and so I think that it's important to sort of go back and forth in learning. And another thing, I heard this quote somewhere that if you ask an 80-year-old where the future is going, they don't know, but I mean, a smart one will tell you to ask a 30-year-old because they're the ones that are going to build it. And I think really for me, the reason I can get involved is because I feel like I'm working with people that are going to build the future of Africa. And I want to learn about what that is. There are just so many things that I can't see right now. I can't see anymore, but they can show me and they can teach me. And so for me, that's always been critical. I mean, I think if you sort of listen to everything I've said, I mean, curiosity drives me. One of my superpowers is connecting people and connections and building sort of bridges. I love building bridges. And I think that that's what mentorship is about. How can I help connect you to someone, to another network? How can I learn from you and learn more about what you're building and see how I can leverage my network to connect you? And if it's capital, who do I know that can help deploy capital to you? So for me, I've always loved being in sort of this center role of how do you connect different people to different things, and how can you bridge different worlds. And I think part of that is having to grow up in, once again, different parts of the world, is constantly just bridging, and you just learn so many skills, and I get to do that with companies.
Hmm. And you can deploy, so talking about capital, you can deploy capital in multiple parts of the world, right? It can be the US, but you've decided to focus on Africa. And actually, I was looking at the selection criteria for some of the founders that you have to work with at Delta40, and it says 50% has to be either African or female, right? Why is that important? Why focusing on Africa and female, specifically female founders?
So, number one, the people that are going to solve, I think the world is, if there's anything that today's climate is teaching us, it is that the world is always going to be changing. But one thing that doesn't change is who is vested in different markets. So at the end of the day, no matter what's happening in America, people can complain, but the private equity market continues to grow. They continue to hit highs every day. They even baked in with the fact that there probably is a recession coming. You get to see the public markets. You get to see the public markets in action in spite of the political environment, and that is because the people that believe in America continue to believe in America, continue to invest in America. If we don't do that on the continent, we're never going to build a place where people want to live, people want to stay, people can thrive. We're always going to be sort of waiting for what other people can give us. And that's not how a continent that is going to be hosting 40% of the world's population should be operating. And so for me, it is that if you're going to be home to 40% of the world's population, you need to build that infrastructure for tomorrow. You need to build a place where people can thrive, a place where people want to come to, now a place where people want to leave. And so for me, if I'm going to be investing my capital, the US does not need my capital. My checks are like, make very little difference in the US markets. They make very little difference with or without my capital. American founders are going to build the companies they're going to build. They will always get access to capital. The average founder in America can probably, their first $20,000 that they can get from their credit card. They literally do not have to leave their bedroom to raise the first $20,000 that they need to build a company. In Africa, for the same type of entrepreneur to get access to $20,000, they have to be out there. They have to meet multiple people. For that first $20,000, I'm just giving you like the most basic example. And a 19-year-old in the US does not need to leave their house to do that. That is why it's important for Africa capital to back African founders.
And since you said you made the 20 deals before you actually created a venture capital firm fund, how many deals did you do since? How did they do? What kind of ticket are you focusing on? Because we have people who do the first money, like you said, $20,000 or $3,000 each and so on. But then we also have the $1 million plus. Based on my conversation with Capella, the problem is kind of in the middle to get the $300,000.
So there are two ways that I sort of invest. One of them is just personal capital. But most of my capital right now is being deployed through the fund. And so the fund is focused on climate solutions, planet positive solutions. So we really believe in ag and food systems, how that is going to be built. Another thing we believe in is that we are going to need to move people and move goods. So mobility is important to us, and e-mobility is very important to us. And then energy, like energy access. How are we going to power the next 300 million people? Who are the innovators building in that space? And we can do a couple of things. And so I might not give you exact numbers here. One of the things we can do is we might have a solution and then need to find a founder and bring in the right founder through our Entrepreneurs in Residence program. And then we co-build. So we build a company together. And that's a very different type of funding profile that we do, but we can do that. A second thing we do is we can invest directly into companies that are being built and provide them with structure and fractional support. So we have what we call shared services. As part of our shared services, we have fractional CFOs, we have fractional chief revenue officers, fractional marketing, fractional talent that they can tap into. And in that case, we will invest. And in that case, we can invest anything from $50,000 to $500,000 into a company and do that type of investment.
And investing essentially is saying a lot of no's, right? So I'm wondering, how do you deal with the deal flow? Is how many options do you see to say one yes? Is it like 100 to 1, or 50 get to your table, or you just are having great 10 ideas and you're just looking for 1,000 founders and then you find the one? How does this ratio work?
I mean, I think every VC is different. We definitely have to see a lot of deals to get to yes. I don't want people to be discouraged because it is very easy for people to be discouraged. Just to give you guys a sense, I mean, I applied to a program once and I remember reading and they said we get over 6,000 applications and I almost didn't apply. And a friend of mine said, you know what, just apply. You have nothing to lose, just apply. And I applied and I got through. And so even like whatever happens, like still put your idea forward because you never know that you might be the yes for that one. So I think like, sometimes we can see up to 100 before we say yes. However, what we do see a lot of times is that we do see amazing entrepreneurs that maybe they might want to build something with us. So even though we might say no to someone, we might say, what you're building, we see a gap, but the gap is more like this. And since we know businesses pivot multiple times, we might say, hey, do you think this is something we can build? But we really believe that this is where the gap is. So sometimes we might see different things. And I always tell people, like, even when I was sort of on the media side, I would tell people when people would pitch me a television show or a film. And I mean, before people pitch me, number one, I always tell them that probably by the end of this meeting, what you pitched is probably not what you're going to walk out with, because in a way, there's always going to be sort of a co-creation that happens here. One of the things we always have to be willing to do is pivot and change and move things. And so we do that with founders. But yeah, we do see, I mean, sometimes we can see up to 500 before we say a yes, because it also has to be where we are in our deployment, where we are in our portfolio, sort of construction. We might say we're overweighted in this territory, so we need to move here. So literally, like if you had sent us something like 3 days ago before we did the analysis to say we were overweighted in this geography, it could make sense. And so I always tell people, like, people can tell you how many no's, but it's also just about the right time and right day and the right place for your no to be a yes for someone else.
Sometimes you just have to be lucky, right? To sit in the
You
right
just
time,
and
and you can never time it. It just sometimes it works out, sometimes doesn't. So, like your friend said, what you get to lose, just send
And
it.
the one thing about us as human beings that I think is so interesting is we do not like to actually account for how much luck has to do with success. And I think that it would be so great if we actually, like, for every success, if there was a portion of it that we can actually say, actually 50% of this was actually, or 80% of this success is actually luck. Because I think it will really help people understand and learn better on how big of a role luck plays and how, but I think as human beings, we want to believe that, it's our ability, it's us, it's our tenacity. But then luck is just a huge part of almost any success we all have. And really, I know that has been part of my story, is that I have been very lucky, and I'm very grateful for the people that have been gracious to make sure that I was lucky.
And I on the website, especially for Delta40, Biola, you do invite people for the opportunity to co-invest, right? And so if, let's say, I also had the same similar path, I am an executive in one of the large organizations, or I'm just someone who's got some extra capital that I think I can invest in businesses on the continent. What does that process look like for those that are looking to maybe even work with Delta40? What would you advise them to be the process for them to get into investment?
So, I mean, first of all, the easiest is for us to co-invest with funds, because that's also part of like what we like to do. We like to bring in other investors to any investment we're doing. Number one, because we have sometimes different expertise, and we can help this company grow faster. Sometimes we are in different geos, so we can help these companies expand into those geographies faster. We have different skill sets and different networks, and we want to bring the best people to support a company, especially when we really believe in that company. So that's really the number one thing we mean, is like, are you an investor looking to invest? And also, too, we really want to attract investment from other parts of the world that might not feel comfortable just going alone. And so we do meet people a lot of times that say, I would love to invest on the continent, but I want to invest alongside a local player. and we do bring in those type of investors as well. So a lot of times founders will come to us to say, I have commitments from X, Y, and Z investor in San Francisco, but they want to see a local investor in the round. And so we will come into that. We then also invite a lot of our co-investors to come into that. So that's one thing. When it comes to personal investments, I mean, I think that's really more of a relationship we have to build over time. So it's really important for us to have a one-on-one relationship with individual investors, because also individual investors do have to be DD'd and making sure that they don't have any exposure. So that is a different of that's a more of a process. While a registered and certified fund, we know that they're a fund, we know that this is what they're doing. And so for individual investors, that's really more relationship based. So get to know us, come to our events. We always host events in Kenya, our offices in Nairobi. We also have events in our offices in Lagos. So please come to our events. Let's get to know each other. And then for that, we do have to make sure that we manage that exposure. We have to make sure that this is an investor that also understands how to invest in early stage companies. Sometimes we will actually introduce them to angel networks so that they can invest through the angel network. We also love having angels co-invest with us. So for me, they're thriving angel networks across the continent. If you go to Africa Business Angels, you can connect with them as an individual investor. And it's just much easier because they sort of do all the legal DD that needs to be done. And that's sort of the due diligence. I mean, for us as a fund, we have to be careful sort of about managing politically exposed people. And we can't just do that for every deal. So it's so much easier if you join and partner with an angel network. And we really want angel networks to be thriving on the continent because they're really good co-investors. So for individuals, please join your local angel network and then say to them, hey, I want to invest alongside Delta40. Both of our offices are very active in the angel network scene on the continent.
And I want to support it because I'm part of the Zambian Business Angel Network. So even
Oh,
people
nice.
from outside of the continent can join. So it's not
Yes.
just for the local people. And
Yes.
I noticed that you recently spoke, I think 4 months ago, the AVCA conference, African Venture Capital Association conference
Yes.
in Lagos.
Yes. Yes.
And what did you learn from the other speakers? Where is it heading? What is the trend now?
So I mean, one of the I have to say, Africa this year was really exciting in the sense of just bringing local investors back to the table. And I think that getting local investors to also commit to the continent and really bringing the diaspora back to the continent and really getting them to understand the opportunities, the investment opportunities. That was one thing. Also getting Africans to commit to investing in Africa. So really getting local investors, HNIs, but also getting foundations, family offices back to the table. I think for me, it felt like almost like a re-energization of like Lake Nigeria and the continent. I think one of the things that the continent has faced over the last few years is a lot of FX volatility, and so we were able to sort of bury a lot of those conversations by showing stability. I think leadership was really clear about the initiatives and the opportunities. And so for me, it sort of had this energy that, where people are back to believing in the continent. And I think that's just sort of like there's been this capital shift and capital flow. And I think we were able to see that people were ready to bring capital back to the continent. So I think for me, what was also important is to see how policy and leadership has the biggest effect on capital flow.
What is some example of it? Is it some laws or more like tax systems, or what kind of
Yes, yes,
policy
yes,
do
yes, yes, yes.
is the
I mean,
best
for
one?
many years, Nigeria has resisted removing oil subsidies, and so we've been heavily subsidizing access to oil. And finally, this new leadership, the new Nigerian president, one of the first things he did on the first day was saying, "This is going to happen. We will remove subsidies." And right away, that opened direct foreign investment into Nigeria. Just that one quick action, and then the second thing was we always had sort of like a dual FX market. So there would be a bank rate and a black market rate, and there was a harmonization of that. And so right away, once again, you saw free flowing capital because now the Naira, which is the Nigerian currency, was now trading at the market. I mean, at market, there wasn't sort of this special dispensation or special rate or you couldn't do projections because you couldn't figure out which rate you needed to use. And so I think and that was a policy issue and a decisive issue. It was something, once again, that had been talked about for many years, but it wasn't happening. So I mean, and then also to just a clear display of leadership. So the Minister of Finance was very present, the Minister of Trade, really engaging, having one-on-one conversations with investors, especially international investors in the room, to say, we are open for business, we want to work with you, what policies do you need to see for this to happen? And I think that those were really clear messages that came across. And I think that's what these big type of gatherings can do for countries. It is a real opportunity for countries to sort of showcase and to tell investors what they are ready to do and how they're ready to partner. And so AFCA was an amazing opportunity for us to do that in Nigeria. And the next one is in Kenya, so next
Oh,
year.
when? So we can book a ticket. Do you know?
Yes.
When is
I
it?
don't they haven't
No.
released the dates yet, but they have released a location. It's normally in April, so the first quarter of the year, so keep your eyes out.
Sounds good. So to close this off, you said you are a very curious lady, curious person. I think that all three have that in common. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So we are learning today from you. So normally, where do you go for your learnings? Is there some podcast you like to listen, or just movie? That you go back and back again to watch to learn from it. What is your like go-to place?
Everything, reading, listening, um, sort of, I mean, also too, one of the things I love about my curiosity and my learning is actually, I try to learn outside of my profession. Like, so I sort of do when I was going to get into VC, I did like a very deep dive. I took all these courses. I sort of did all these things. And so I network with people, and that's a big part of how I learn. Their industry events. But really, one of the ways that I find that your best learning comes from is actually learning things outside of what you do every day. And so learning more about the science of cooking, you can find so many different parallels to life. Learning about the future of construction. I mean, I literally I'm not going to go build a house, but it helps you learn sort of about innovation. And so what I'm always trying to do is literally pick something that has nothing to do with my day to day. And I find that, number one, it relaxes me. And number two, I'm learning something new. But one of the things that one of my big kicks is really around science and health. And also just sort of like the science of the human body is, I never get tired of listening to stuff like that. So I find that I listen to a lot of, Huberman, Huberman. I love to listen and learn from other leaders. And so I listened to, I don't know if you guys have been listening to the Afropolitan podcast with Chika and Eche, a portfolio company as well. So, hey, go listen. So once again, yeah. So listening to that, starting listening to you guys, and also, Diary of a CEO, but everyone listens to Diary of a CEO now. So, but yeah, so for me, it's really about learning and there's also like a couple of Yoruba podcasts I listen to. There's a Yoruba show I watch on YouTube called Masoyibo, which my mom dragged me into it. But I find that every time I listen to it, I learn so much more about culture and the currency of culture and how to monetize and how to build an audience. And so one of the things for me that's really been interesting is watching how this show, it's a YouTube show. It's literally like a podcast, but they bring a guest in, and it's a game show. And so I'm always, for me, is like how they build community. And so it's been really interesting to see how he's turned this sort of very niche show about your Yoruba knowledge into now an MC sort of event. He's now a thought leader on the language, and he's built this community from like 7-year-olds all the way up to 80 my mom's 80 and my mom's almost 80. So watching that community building that's cross-cutting is super interesting to me. So when I'm watching with my mom and my daughter joins us, for me, I'm more learning about just community building through new media platforms. And so for me, it's just once again transformed the way I see YouTube and the future role of YouTube. And that then informs my investment choices sometimes. So my thing about people that are curious and want to learn, is to learn about as many different things as possible. And of course, I love art. I love visual art. I love going to museums. I love collecting when I can. So yeah, those are my schools.
I was curious to find out if there's any one question that you wish you were asked, because you've been on multiple interviews, right? Is there one question that you think or you wish you were asked, and what would be your response to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you actually asked it, which was sort of like, what is something that I wished I hadn't done that I did, and what sort of lessons I've learned. And I think that sometimes I always have to make sure that in talking sort of about this journey, there's also been a lot of disappointments, and also too there's a lot of failures and learning and unexpected bumps along the way. And I know sometimes when leaders talk, sometimes the journey can sound like it was smooth and there was sort of no bumps along the way. So I think it's always important to just sort of give people moments of reflection to sort of because I think sometimes the beauty is in connecting the dots based on where you are today, looking backwards. I think it definitely was much harder to do that type of reflection when I was younger, just because there just wasn't enough experience to be able to do that. But I think now, in sort of like being able to be reflective and look at some of the best decisions, some of the decisions that I would probably make differently, I think that it's important that interviews are also reflective of that. So I think we talked a lot about some of the failures along the way and some of the disappointments. So nothing left.
Thank you so much, Biola. I mean, you've been such an amazing guest. So much to unpack there. From your experience as a marketing and media professional and executive, investments, working with startups, a business owner, so much that we have unpacked today, and we're so grateful and thankful for your time. Where can people find you as we close? If someone wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I do go through periods of not being active. So if you catch me during those periods, just if you send me a message, I will respond eventually. Also, I share my exercise. I exercise quite a bit. I share my exercise on Biola Alabi on Instagram. And those are really the only two platforms I'm at. And of course, you can always reach me at Delta40. We're actively investing in climate solutions and people that are creating positive impacts in the world, and also creating jobs. So livelihood and jobs are very important to us as we look at mobility, energy, and agriculture. And really, everything has to have and be powered by a technology. So technology is very important to us as we invest, because we really believe in the future of technology and really improving these sectors. And so please feel free to reach out. We have a screening link on our website. So if you don't mind, please put them in the show notes, and people can just sort of send and reach out to us. And we are very diligent about looking at those applications and reaching out to founders that match our thesis. Another thing, just for founders on the continent, really make sure you understand the thesis that people are investing in as you reach out. I think it also helps so that it just sort of reduces the friction. And I know there's a lot of founders that say they don't get feedback, and sometimes it's a lack of alignment on the thesis. So please take a look at our thesis, and feel free to reach out to us. But I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and yeah. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Biola. For those, sorry, only at the end did you hear about Biola's fitness journey, or at least how she's passionate about fitness. So if you want more fitness tips, go to her Instagram, but definitely anything to do with investments and your professional career, do reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you for tuning in again on the Beyond the Pivot podcast. Please like and share whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Could be your Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if it's YouTube, please remember to subscribe. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.